Shalom, shalom, mishpokah. Welcome to another edition of Ray Bash's Ramblings. I'm your host, Rabbi Yehuda Ben Shomer. This video that I'm about to make may possibly be one of the most viewed videos that I have ever produced, simply because the universality of the subject matter that I'm about to deal with, and that is the idea of suffering. It has confounded theologians, and it has confounded people, and has disturbed people ever since the beginning of time. I would suspect just about everybody who ever walked the face of the earth has asked themselves, if there is such thing as a loving God, why is there suffering in the world? I don't claim to have the answer. I don't claim to have the complete answer. I don't claim to have the full answer. I don't claim to have an answer that is aesthetically or universally pleasing to everybody. I don't claim to have an answer that's going to sit right or settle right with everyone, but I'm going to give you the answer which I sincerely believe. Christianity is pretty unique among the religions of the world in the fact that they believe that man was created in a sinless state, and man has fallen from that position of a sinless state into a position of sin, which the fall of man, sin has entered the world, and therefore death has entered the world, and therefore suffering has entered the world. Modern day Judaism and many other religions out there do not believe in the fall of mankind, and yet they believe that there is suffering in the world, and that they believe that there is a loving God, but yet they can't explain the reason why there's suffering in the world. To me, it only logically makes sense that if there is such a loving God that allows suffering in the world, that he did not personally allow it. All he did was create the possibility for evil and the possibility for suffering by giving the sinless mankind that he initially created the free will to choose whether to remain sinless or whether to sin, whether to love and obey him and to serve him or not. Unfortunately, according to the Genesis record and the Genesis account, we chose not to fully obey God, and therefore we have fallen from a sinless state into a state of sinfulness, and therefore we introduced death and suffering to the world. Many people then further ask, well, if there is such thing as a loving God, and there is such a thing as suffering in the world, how come this loving God just doesn't take suffering away? Because of our free will. That's why he doesn't take it away. We have chosen this path. God is not to blame for our suffering. God is not to blame for the suffering in the world. We, and we alone as human beings, are the only ones that are accountable and are the only ones to blame for suffering in this world. And because of sin, and because of the perpetual nature and the deepening of sin, how sin can grow more grotesque and more gross and more grave, therefore suffering is magnified in this world, and we're the only ones to blame for it. And because of our free will, and God gives us free will of actions, whether to serve him or not, whether to sin or not, whether to choose life or not, whether to choose death or not, what have you, he has allowed suffering to continue and to take place because of the free will of man. God is a gentleman, and he will not go against people's free will in order just to stop and alleviate suffering. Suffering in the scheme of life is short and minimal. In the scheme of eternity, it's just barely a blip on the radar screen. It's barely noticeable, because through eternity we have the chance to choose once again life and life eternal, or to choose death and death eternal and to suffer for eternity, or to choose life and to choose bliss and not suffer for eternity. Again, it is our free will, and again, the choice is up to us. We are the only ones who control our fate in regards to suffering. Now, suffering is never meant to be, therefore suffering is always an enigma to us, just as death. Death is always an enigma to us. It always tears us apart and makes us grieve and mourn because it's unnatural, and it's never meant to be. Therefore we can't fully grasp death, and that's why death hits us so hard when a loved one dies. But the unique thing about suffering And the unique thing about free will is we as humans, through the help of God, have the ability to use suffering to our advantage. Now, what do I mean? I think it's according to the book of Yaakov, the book of James, where such trials and tribulations, which some people may call suffering, produces positive things such as patience if we take it in the right way. If we look at our suffering and say to ourselves, what lessons can I learn from this bout of suffering? How can I use suffering to my advantage to make me into a better person and to improve my life? If we endure, we know that everything in this world, everything in this life is temporary and transitory. In other words, even though there's an underlying continuance of suffering, there are different types of suffering, different levels of suffering, and there's different durations of suffering. And the scriptures are true when it says, and it came to pass, because suffering just comes and goes, and we have that opportunity in the midst of suffering, whether to be able to learn from it, whether to be able to grow from it, whether to be able to be refined from it, or whether we choose to allow suffering to make us bitter, to make us angry, to make us hateful, to destroy us and to crumple us and to cripple us, or are we going to use it to make us better, to refine us, to make us more into what God wants us and has us to be. If we can endure to the end, we will be saved. If we can endure and overcome suffering in this world, we won't have to deal with it in the world to come. If we can look at suffering not as an enemy, but as an ally, as a harsh teacher, so to speak, we can learn valuable life lessons from suffering. So when suffering of the same sort comes again, we are more able to deal with it. We are more able to go through it. We are more able to endure it without the magnitude of the suffering that was experienced before. I hope this has enlightened some of you. I hope this has made sense to a lot of people. This may be the only video I do on suffering. Then again, I may do another one, who knows, because it is definitely a type of subject matter that you can go on and on about. But I'll end for now, and we'll see you on the flip side. Shalom and Shavua Tov. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.